Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a crime drama from Japan, Japanese language English subs, released in the year 2014, directed by Tetsuya Nakashima, and this film is called World of Kanako. So World of Kanako is about this beautiful schoolgirl named Kanako. She's very popular, she's a straight-A student, and she gives the impression that she is a beautiful sort of innocent princess. But unfortunately, first impressions and basically the facade of someone can actually be a lot different to reality, and this is the shocking truth that the mother of Kanako and her father Akikazu have to come to terms with, because Kanako has gone missing for 6 days, and so the mother is very worried. She calls her ex-husband, who is this brutal pig of a human being, very despicable person, and she says okay, she needs to be found. And so Akikazu comes back into the mother's life, and this is where he's going to try and track down his daughter, but this is going to lead him down some very unexpected paths that basically force Akikazu to come to the realization that maybe the daughter is not the person he thought she was. And so what happens at that point on whether or not Kanako can be found is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on World of Kanako. This is a movie I didn't hear anyone talk about, so it was very much a blind buy, and it was a blind experience, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to get myself in for, but at the end of the day, there is one word I can use to sum up this film, and that is wow. This is by far the darkest experience I've had in a very long time. It's one of the most cruel sort of exercises in pain and suffering that I have seen, and that is the reason why I really like this movie. This is a movie that hits you so hard over the head, and it just continues to kick you while you're on the ground. You're left bleeding and spluttering and gasping for breath in the gutter, and no one's going to help you. Basically, this is the ugly human beings don't help each other, and that's the reason why you're going to be left in a pile of your own blood and basically calling out to someone to help you, but everyone's going to walk past you and they don't really care about you. And so that's the kind of feeling you get from watching World of Kanako, and it's just basically a movie where there's no real likable human being in this film, and it's just showing you how bad one human can be to another. It's manipulation, it's the devastation of sexual violence, there's violence that is very hard-hitting, very graphic and very bloody, and it's just basically a descent into hell. And so this is a movie that is not going to make you feel good. It's a movie that does have basically ugliness around every corner. It's the corruption of society, it's how society can mold a person because of the environment that they're being brought up in. It's Akikazu, who is this anti-hero, who is this guy you're supposed to like but you can't like because of the way he treats other people, but he has that traditional good guy aspect that he's trying to look for Kanako, his daughter, but does he have any love for her? What is going on? And so as he starts to learn more and more about his daughter, this is where the very strange relationship between father and daughter starts to get to a point where it becomes very disturbing. And I'm not going to tell you what happens, but the relationships in this film, on one hand you've got this really dysfunctional family, sort of a family drama, and on the other hand you have this world that is so dark and depressing that is typical of Japanese insanity. And so the movie is not only going to hit you with an absolute force of cruelty, but it's also going to impress you with the way it tells its story. Now, it actually uses a lot of what makes Korean dramas so good, whether it's I Saw the Devil, The Chaser, or Bittersweet Life, or any other movies from Kim Ji-woon or Park Chan-wook. Basically what they do, they have really long films. This movie goes for 1 hour and 54 minutes, but what World of Kanako and those movies I've just mentioned have in common was the ability to keep the audience interested without ever getting bored. And the reason why you're so interested is because when one aspect of the story is exhausted, another aspect will pile on top of that, and another aspect and another aspect. And so the director Tetsuya Nakashima is aware the fact that it is a long film, and he's come up with a plan to always keep the audience invested. Basically, why should you want to watch even further? And the director is giving you a very strong reason. And so the elevation of storytelling and the snowball effect the movie has kept me glued to the screen. There were twists and turns that I gave the movie a completely new dimension, a completely new avenue to go down, and those avenues are very dark and depressing. The further the film goes on, the more gut-wrenching the film actually becomes. And so what Akikazu is actually having in store for him, on one hand I hope that he would get Kanako and basically reunite with his family, but on the other hand, did Akikazu deserve it? Because the people he was dealing with, yes, they were despicable, but he was just as despicable as them. And so all the goodness in humanity, basically all the feel-good material, has been thrust away. Basically not only thrust away, but been forced on the ground and repeatedly hit with a hammer, and basically saying, okay, I'm going to destroy everything that makes you feel good, and I'm just going to give you a really dark and depressing story that basically is everything wrong with humanity. And so Tetsuya Nakashima has created something that I thought was extremely memorable, but be very careful going into it because of the levels of graphic violence, and there are some scenes that just had me my mouth on the ground. Basically my jaw dropped because I wasn't quite prepared for how far this movie was going to go and how dark the corners were actually going to be. And so the movie is unpredictable in what it's trying to do, and it will never cease to shock you right up until the very, very memorable ending that I thought was absolutely fantastic. This is everything that is good about Japanese cinema. It's everything that is good about Asian cinema in general. As I said, Koreans have really made a name for themselves because they can tell an epic story in a way where you always feel like there's something different for you, and World of Kanako has that sort of prize at the end of a certain scene. If you actually keep with it, it's going to ever evolve, and you want to know whether or not Kanako is going to be found. But as the movie goes on, you get basically first impressions never last, and so every person feels as though they've got something to hide, and that thing they're hiding is very, very sinister. So it's a very, very cruel film. I thought the visuals were absolutely fantastic. As I said, the violence is very unforgiving. So if you are not a seasoned sort of hardcore sort of, not horror, but gangster type of hardcore violent fan, then you're going to be very, very upset by what happens, and just how these people come into the film and how they're manipulated and how they're corrupted, I just thought was really soul crunching. And so this sounds like your kind of thing. World of Kanako is definitely for you. I thought the acting, especially from Akikazu, who played this really corrupt person, I thought did a fantastic job at getting that character through, and someone that you can root for because he's going into a world that is despicable and you want Kanako to come out. But on the other hand, you feel as though he's a terrible human as well. And so which way do you go? And so there's no real safety barrier. And when there's no safety barrier, that level of discomfort is amplified to a point where you almost can't take it anymore. So Kanako, who is the character of this beautiful girl, once you start to get to know a little bit more about her story, the situation just becomes very complex, and as I said, it gets darker and darker up until finally it finishes, and you think to yourself, okay, well, can I breathe now? Because I felt as though I haven't breathed in basically an hour and 54 minutes, and so it was something that took me by surprise. No one really talks about it, which I think is a travesty, because this movie really ticks a lot of the right boxes as far as extreme cinema is concerned. If I had a problem with the movie, I would say that it's a problem I share in a lot of Japanese films and Korean films as well, is that they tend to dictate when you should be feeling a certain emotion. Now, I didn't think this film needed it because there were other scenes that weren't dictated through the music that were very soul-crunching, and so there's a level of confidence in there, but there's other scenes where I thought, alright, well, I didn't need the music. Is that it's kind of force-feeding how you should feel, where it didn't really need to because it was doing it naturally. And then you've also got the some music that didn't really fit the overall mood of the film, and I thought that was a little bit out of place. But pushing that aside, that was only a minimal sort of criticism in what was a fantastic experience. As I said, it's a very cruel experience. It hits you so hard, it leaves you bleeding and spluttering in a gutter, and basically people are not going to help you. They're going to walk right over you and basically saying, fend for yourself, I don't care. So as I said, that's the type of feeling you get from this movie. If it sounds like your cup of tea, definitely go out there and see it. I'm sure that it'll impress you, and that's the reason why I'm going to give World of Kanako 4 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.